So, what happens when the tallest dam in the entire United States just starts to fall apart? Today, we're jumping right into a massive engineering drama. It's a story about the frantic race to figure out a fix after a catastrophic failure put almost 200,000 lives on the line. All right, let's set the scene. It's March 2017. The main spillway at California's Oroville Dam has literally ripped itself to shreds, forcing a massive evacuation. And with all the spring snowmelt about to come rushing down, well, the clock is ticking, loud. The state's top engineers are in a desperate scramble to find a solution, and fast. I mean, how do you even begin to get your head around a disaster this big? We're going to start by looking at those very first days of the recovery effort, when the experts finally got their boots on the ground and saw the damage for themselves. So, step one was to call in the heavy hitters. California's Department of Water Resources, you'll see them called DWR. They put together an independent board of consultants, the BOC. You can think of these guys as the Supreme Court of dam engineering, right? They're the ones you call for a crucial second opinion. And in those first 10 days of March, they held their first meetings and made their first absolutely critical visit to the site. And almost immediately, this investigation took a really shocking turn. As this board of consultants started digging into the original construction plans from the 1960s, they found some deeply, deeply troubling stuff. This wasn't just about the new damage. The dam's problems might have been, well, baked in from the very beginning. Okay, the list of original flaws they uncovered is pretty alarming. The main concrete slab, shockingly thin, only about 12 inches. And get this, the foundation wasn't solid rock everywhere. It had been patched up with compacted clay. Then they saw a ton of water pouring out of the underdrains, which is a massive red flag. All of this pointed to an engineer's worst nightmare, a phenomenon called piping. Basically, water was getting under the concrete and just washing away the foundation, kind of like the tide pulling sand out from under a seashell. The whole structure was being hollowed out from below. And that led to this, well, chilling conclusion in their very first memo. So here's the key takeaway. They realized the problem wasn't just the giant hole that everyone could see. No. The entire structure, the whole thing could be fundamentally broken. They weren't just patching a break anymore, they might have to replace everything. This one discovery completely changed the game. It set up the central conflict of the entire recovery, a truly incredible race against the rain with a deadline that was absolutely, positively non-negotiable. So the team's number one priority was crystal clear. The emergency spillway, that's the backup that had nearly failed itself and triggered all those evacuations, it could not be used, period. The board called it absolutely critical to avoid it. All of their hopes were now pinned on getting the main spillway back in action. And this was the brutal schedule they were staring down. There was literally no time to think. A grading contract had to be out the door by the end of March. A final design for what would become a multi-billion-dollar project had to be chosen just 1 week later. By June 1st, all the major construction contracts had to be signed, and it was all a mad dash to that one single date that mattered, November 1st. That's when the spillway had to be ready for the winter rains. Every single day counted. The experts themselves put it pretty bluntly in their first memo. There was zero margin for error, zero room for any delay. You can just feel the immense pressure they were under. So with that insane clock ticking, the core debate really heated up. What's the right move here? Do you go for a quick and dirty patch to get through the winter, or do you try to pull off a permanent, much more complicated fix right now? And the biggest question mark was the upper half of the spillway. You know, the part that hadn't totally failed, but as they now knew, was deeply flawed. So, what was the right call? Two main options popped up. Option one was a temporary overlay. Think of it like just paving over the old cracked concrete. It's faster, yeah, but the board hated it. They said it left too many unknowns about that rotting foundation underneath. Option two, a full replacement. Rip out all the old concrete and rebuild it right from the ground up. This was the one the experts wanted. It was the only way to be sure they were fixing the real problem. So you're probably asking, how could they even think about a full replacement with a timeline like that? Well, the key was a technology called roller compacted concrete, or RCC. The easiest way to picture it is like paving a road, but with concrete instead of asphalt. It lets you spread massive amounts of material incredibly quickly. It was a total game changer. And this RCC was the heart of the plan for the lower half of the spillway, you know, where that giant canyon had been carved out by the water. The plan was to fill those huge holes with concrete and RCC to create a stable, if kind of rough surface that could handle the winter flows. The final, super smooth top layer, that would have to wait for the next year. And so, by the end of this absolutely frantic first month, all that intense debate finally led to a single, unified plan of attack. The decision was in. They were going for it. They decided to do the more robust, long-term solution, completely demolish and replace the upper chute, and use that phased RCC approach for the lower chute. The state agency and the independent experts were totally on the same page. And just to give you an idea of the sheer power they were designing for, check out these numbers. The interim goal for the main spillway was 270,000 cubic feet per second. To put that in perspective, that's like an entire football field covered in a foot of water rushing past you every single second. Just a mind-boggling amount of force. But even with this monumental effort, the experts left one final, pretty sobering note of caution. They warned that even after all the repairs, using that emergency spillway for a really huge flood could still cause significant erosion damage. Some risks, it seems, would always be there. So, the plan was locked in. The diagnosis was done, the designs were taking shape, but the biggest question of all still loomed over the entire project. With the rainy season getting closer every single day, could they possibly build it all in time?